the next 2 to 10 years where I have serious concerns. The hate speech, the extremism going into the US elections, dealing with the first time AIs bring down a power plant or Wall Street servers.
I think where we're going right now will probably be okay, but we may not, and we will all die. We're not even sure what regulation to introduce. You can create a company with GPT-4 that will probably do as well, if not better, than any other company automated within a year.
What?
Yeah. This is something we are raising, not to anthropomorphize it, but what are we feeding it? I think aligning an AI downstream on its actions is incredibly difficult. Free-range organic models. The data for all large models should be made transparent.
Let's turn to that conversation, because it's one that's important. It's a conversation I have at the dinner table literally every night, and with my kids and in the companies I advise. I parse AI and AGI into 3 segments. Where we are today, where it's extraordinarily powerful, useful, and it's fun, and I don't feel danger from it yet. The next 2 to 10 years where I have serious concerns. Going into the US elections, dealing with the first time AIs bring down a power plant or Wall Street servers, the impact on deepfakes on the US elections, and so forth. That's a 2 to 10 year horizon where new dystopian, challenging impact will happen, where society is not agile enough to adapt to it yet. And then there's a third chapter, which is AGI. We have a super intelligent, billionfold more capable than a human being. And is that more like Arnold Schwarzenegger or more like her? Right?
Yeah. I don't think it'll be Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's really inefficient.
Well, I saw him this morning biking, so let me let's not use him. Let's use Terminator instead. We're in Hollywood here. So
Yeah.
is it Skynet and Terminator? So let me get I'm polling people here as someone in the thick of it. A super AGI, is it pro-life, pro-abundance, or is it something that we should be deeply concerned about?
I think where we're going right now will probably be okay, but we may not, and we will all die.
What tips that?
I think what tips that you are what you eat. We're feeding it all the junk of the internet and these hyper-optimized nasty equations. And
the hate speech, the extremism that is, people need to realize these AIs are trained upon everything everyone's been putting into Facebook and Twitter and on the web.
And amplifies the worst of that as a base model. And so we're training larger and larger models. We're making them agentic in that we're connecting them up to the world. And you're making it so the models can take over other models and other things. Again, the people are like poo-pooing and saying these things. Our organizations are slow, dumb AI. The Nazi Party was AI.
How so?
It was an artificial intelligence that basically provisioned humans. And the most sensible people in the world are Germans, one can say, and yet they committed the Holocaust and other things like that. Our organizations emerged out of stories. So there was a story of the Nazi Party, of the Communist Party, the Great Leap Forward, of the North Korean dictatorship. Positive stories as well, and they were written on text, and it made the world black and white in a way. That's why I love the poem Howl by Ginsberg about this Carthaginian demon Moloch. I think Moloch comes through text, the stories that we use to drive our organizations, because all the context is lost. Again, it makes the world black and white. And that's why organizations just don't work. They have to turn us into cogs. So can an AI take over an organization? Yes.
Sure.
Can it?
It can actually just slightly sway leaders who are currently running organizations.
Sway leaders that currently running organizations. It can create companies. You can create a company with GPT-4 that will probably do as well, if not better, than any other company automated within a year. Because think about what a company needs to do, right? And so if it can sway leaders, if it can send emails that you don't know who's sending what, it can do anything by co-opting any of our existing organizations. And that can lead to immensely bad things. Will it do bad things? Again, if I was trained on the whole of the internet, I would probably be a bit crazier than I am right now. We're feeding them junk. Let's feed it good stuff. It still needs to understand all the evils of the world and things like that. But again, this is something we are raising, not to anthropomorphize it, but what are we feeding it? What's our objective function?
I want to focus on this a second. We'll come back to the next 2 to 10 years in a little bit. But because this is the conversation I've had with Mo Gaudat as well, who believes there is incredibly divine nature of humanity, of love and compassion and community, and there is much good in humanity. The question is, can we feed and train AI on that sufficient to sort of tilt the singularity of AI towards a pro-humanity?
We can, if we take the data from teaching kids and learning from kids and use that as the base for AI. Because that's what you need to teach an AI. It's the curriculum learning method, effectively. If we take national data sets that reflect diverse cultures, so it's not just a monoculture that's hyper-optimized for engagement, and we feed that to AI as the base. Because what you do is you can teach the AI in levels. Literally, you can put it through kindergarten, then grade school, then high school. It's got the base, and then you can teach it about the bad of the world. I think aligning an AI downstream on its actions is incredibly difficult. Because if it's more capable than you, which is the definition of ASI, artificial superintelligence, the only way you can 100% align it, if you don't do anything before, in the way that you feed it and train it, is if you remove its freedom. And it's very difficult to remove the freedom of people more capable than you.
Yeah.
And then there is this really dangerous point before we get there, whereby these models are like a few hundred gigabytes. You can download them on a memory stick.
Yeah. How many lines of code?
Google's Palm model, which is the basis of MedPalm, we did a replication of that in 207 lines of code.
What?
Yeah. So you can look at one of our Stability AI fellows, Lucid Reigns. He replicates all these models in a few hundred lines of code.
That's crazy. I mean, compared to, I know AT&T has like 1 million lines of code for some of its mobile services. I mean,
a couple of hundred lines, a couple of thousand lines of code creates something that can write all the code in the world. This is a real exponential technology. The limiting factor is running supercomputers that are more complex, but as complex as particle physics colliders. You know? Wow. Like you literally get errors because of solar rays and things like that. Again, our supercomputer, we're one of the players. We're the main open source player. Our supercomputer uses 10 megawatts of electricity. Some of the others use like 30, 40.
Wow.
These are serious pieces of equipment.
For sure. So again, what are we doing? What should people be thinking about and doing now to reduce the probability of a dystopian, artificial superintelligence?
We should be focusing on data. We bulked, now we cut. We should move away from web crawls. We should think intentionally what we're feeding these AIs that will be co-opting more and more of our mind space and augmenting our capabilities. Because again, we are what we eat, information diet. How is it different to an AI to a human? Even what we do, as you said, kind of like you've only got limited mental capacity because you've got this energy gradient descent. It's like Carl Fristrand's theory of free energy principle. Mm-hmm. You literally have gradient descent as the key thing for building these AIs. You optimize for energy.
Sure.
So why are we feeding it junk?
So who makes that decision of what they get fed? Is it you and Sam Altman and Sundar? Is it government regulation? Is it the public being more kind in its communications to each other?
I think that I'm going to push for an economic outcome, which is that better data sets require less model training. So one of the things that we funded was called Data Comp. Data Comp.
Okay.
So a few years ago, the largest image data set available was 100 million images. Data Comp is 12 billion. And then on a billion image subset of that, they trained a image to text model. This is a collaboration of various people led by University of Washington that outperformed OpenAI's image to text model on 1/10 of the compute because it was such high quality. So we have to move from quantity to quality now. And I think there is a market imperative to that.
This is the equivalent of what you eat. This is a healthy diet.
Free-range organic models.
Yes.
I think that the data for all large models should be made transparent. You can then tune it, but for the base, the pre-training step, you should lodge what data you train your models on. and it should adhere to standards and quality of data upstream.
So that is a regulatory cornerstone that you think is going to be important.
I think potentially. I don't think regulation will keep up. So instead, we're working on building better diverse data sets that everyone will want to use anyway.
And just make them available.
Every nation should have its own data set, both of the data from teaching kids and learning from kids across modalities, and then also national broadcaster data. Because then that leads to national models that can stoke innovation, that can replace job disruption.
I love that vision you have, by the way. I mean, as a leader in this industry, that's what gets me excited.
Because all technology is biased.
Yeah.
How else are you going to do this unless you do that? But there's economic value now. If it said this a year ago, everyone would be like, what? But this is what we were building towards. Mm-hmm. And again, I think it's positive for humanity, it's positive for communities, it's positive for society to have this as national and international infrastructure.
Hey everybody, this is Peter. A quick break from the episode. I'm a firm believer that science and technology and how entrepreneurs can change the world is the only real news out there worth consuming. I don't watch the crisis news network I call CNN or Fox and hear every devastating piece of news on the planet. I spend my time training my neural net the way I see the world by looking at the incredible breakthroughs in science and technology, how entrepreneurs are solving the world's grand challenges, what the breakthroughs are in longevity, how exponential technologies are transforming our world. So twice a week, I put out a blog. One blog is looking at the future of longevity, age reversal, biotech, increasing your health span. The other blog looks at exponential technologies, AI, 3D printing, synthetic biology, AR, VR, blockchain. These technologies are transforming what you as an entrepreneur can do. If this is the kind of news you want to learn about and shape your neural nets with, go to Diamandis.com/blog and learn more. Now back to the episode.
Next question. How long do we have to get that in place before we lose the mind share or the nourishment war?
Couple of years.
Yeah, I mean that was Mo's prediction as well. That we've got the next 2 years is the game.
The exponential increase in compute is insane. We've gone from 2 companies being able to train a GPT-4 model to 20 next year, and there's no guardrails. There's nothing around this. And even if you train one, again, the bad guys can steal it by downloading it on a USB stick and taking it away. It's not like Operation Merlin. Did you ever take about Operation Merlin?
No.
It's been declassified. In 2000, the Clinton administration wanted to divert the Iranian nuclear program.
I remember this is the centrifuge.
No.
Oh.
So what they did was they gave some plans to, I believe it was a Russian defector, who then the idea was there were errors in that, so they'd go down the wrong path for years. So he sold it to the Iranians. It's on Wikipedia. You can check it out. And then he came back and he said, I sold it. I'm like, fantastic. Good. Oh, but there were some errors in there because he was a nuclear scientist.
Oh, no.
So he corrected them. So the reason that we know that Iran has the nuclear capability is because America sold it to them.
Oh my God.
But they still needed years to build it.
Oh.
Whereas this, you download it on a USB stick, you run it on a GPU, and it's there. It's got the
So
capabilities.
if you make it cheap enough and quality enough and give it away for free, then you make it in everybody's economic best interest to use the higher quality
data sets, yeah.
Yeah, data sets.
And then less of an issue to create large models if you have a swarm model where each individual model becomes less impactful as well and less capable. Just like human societies are not know-it-alls, they are individualized groups.
Back when the early dangers of recombinant DNA, when the first restriction enzymes came online, it was like 1980s, and everybody was in great fear, and the question was, are we going to regulate this? All of the early, I was at MIT and Harvard at the time, and I was in the labs. I was using recombinant enzymes, and I was just a pipsqueak in the labs there. But the conversation was, is the government going to overregulate us? Mm-hmm. And what happened was that the scientists got together at a place called Asilomar, and they did a very famous set of Asilomar conferences, and they self-regulated. What's going on there? Are those conversations going on among leaders like yourself in the industry?
There are. And, there's 3 levels, which is big tech, that the government kind of hates. And apparently next week, Meta is releasing new open source models and things, which will get even more focus. Then there's emergent tech, so Anthropic, OpenAI,
Sure.
some of these others, the other leaders. They have a different set of parameters because they can work more freely than big tech. And there's open source, which is where we are.
Yep.
Because all of the world's governments and regulated industries will run on open auditable models. Because you can't run on black boxes, right? And I think that'll be legislation. But the reality is there's only a handful of us. There'll be far more potentially of us and far more players. And unlike recombinant DNA, there is an economic imperative to deploy this technology,
As
a national
fast as possible.
security
Yeah.
imperative to deploy this technology. And it creates a race condition.
Yeah.
So even if you regulate, like we've already seen regulatory arbitrage where you have jurisdictions like Israel and Japan having much looser web scraping data laws. They'll have much looser regulation laws. Like you'll be scraping in Israel, training in Qatar, and then serving it out of Botswana or something.
Right.
I mean, like,
Yeah.
and we're not even sure what regulation to introduce. Like, genuinely, we're coming at this from a good point of view, but there are too many no-nos because it goes everywhere from freaking Arnold Schwarzenegger Skynet Terminators and Her to, well, what if Her is Siri all of a sudden and Scarlett Johansson's voice is whispering to your kids to buy
Yeah.
like these things, through to just very mundane things, not mundane things, huge things like the future of Hollywood and actors' rights and all of these. And how do you pay? Like, if we had 2 billion images in the original Stable Diffusion, okay, we could have an attribution. Again, it was a research artifact to kick off, but you're paying about 0.01 cents per 1,000 images generated by someone.
Wow.
Because it's 2 billion and it costs like less than a cent to generate an image. Are you going to pay proportionately? Like, nobody knows. And so what we've moved from now is we've moved from reactive to just trying to figure out and put something on the table. So at least there's some framework. And what I've come down to is data sets.
So this is like Google's move with Android. When you provide something open source and it's super solid, it can dominate the world share.
Why would you do anything else? So like with the deepfake stuff, we saw image models coming out of some not nice places, shall we say.
Yeah.
And we were like, let's standardize it and put invisible watermarks in so that you can combat deepfakes much easier. Like, it's good business, but it's also, it needs standardization. We held back one of our image models, Deep Floyd, for 5 months because it was too good to release.
Wow. And you finally fixed that with the watermarks?
Yeah, we put some watermarking in, and then it was, but the whole industry had moved forward. So like, okay, now we can.
And this
release
is the problem. You can't,
You just have to time it so carefully. Like
Speaking of the whole industry, I have to ask you a question I've been dying to get a reasonable answer for. What's up with Siri? Why is Apple so out of the game, at least from the external? Now, one of the closest, one of the least open organizations out there, and it pays them great dividends in their success. But I would die for a capability that if Siri could just understand what I was saying and just get the names right. It's like I'm texting Kristen and her name is right there and you spell it completely different from the person I'm texting. I mean, basic, simple stuff.
They do have a neural engine on there as well, which is a specialist AI chip in all the latest smartphones and others. Stable Diffusion was the first model to actually have neural engine access of the external transformer models. It's a case of Apple is an engineering organization, not a research organization. So they engineer beautifully.
They do.
But they don't have advanced research because the best researchers want to be able to publish open.
And Apple does not allow public conversation on their content.
They have started slightly. So they're hiring AI developers very quickly, but the reality is they can take open models. So Meta's releasing a lot of their models open without identifying what the data is. So I'd say it's like 80% open. I think you need 100% open for governments and things like that, which is where we come in. Because they want to commoditize the complement of others in terms of they want others to also take their models and optimize it for every single chip. And then Apple can use those models too to make Siri better. Because right now, guaranteed, if you put Whisper on Siri, it would be a dozen times better.
Sure.
We have the technology already. It just takes time to go into consumer, just like enterprise, and Apple is enterprise.
Yeah.